guess what? It looks like Joe Biden has gone and done himself some presidentin. Not only has he gone and shot down a few unidentified objects that could have been anything from Chinese spy ships to used car lot noodle men that got carried away on a gust of wind, but he's actually addressed the American people on the subject. Not to take questions on the subject, no, but just simply to show us what an absolute tough guy he is.
Make no mistake, if any object presents a threat to the safety and security of the American people, I will take it down.
Well, this is quite a turn for the White House, which had been content for the past 2 weeks to let speculation run wild while it did nothing about these things. And if you want to understand what's going on in the Biden administration, I think it's important to understand the strategy about why they did this. Now, remember, what started with a potential national security crisis involving a Chinese spy balloon hovering over an airbase that is home to 150 of America's deadliest intercontinental ballistic missiles revved up into alarm as more and more objects seemed to be found floating in the sky and were all eventually shot down. Of course, the whole thing descended into farce as people started to wonder if this whole thing could have been, well, I don't know, extraterrestrial in nature.
The visitors arrived in 50 gigantic motherships, which stunned the world with their monumental size and power.
We have come in peace because we need your help.
But of course, as we now know, these objects were no prelude to alien invasion. There was no need for anyone to start carving landing sites out of their mashed potatoes like poor old Roy in Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And how do we know this? Well, because Karine Jean-Pierre told us so.
There is no indication of aliens or extraterrestrial activity. With these recent takedowns, again, there is no indication of aliens or terrestrial activity with these recent takedowns. Wanted to make sure that the American people knew that.
Now, this is really important. You can tell that she is telling the truth in that clip. And you know why? Because her eyes aren't blinking faster than the wings of a hummingbird who has just discovered Hunter Biden's special bird feeder. But I'll tell you what, I actually think the whole story, turning the whole story into a farce about space aliens, was a pretty clever strategy by the White House. Why? Well, if you think about it, it's all about distraction. And it has turned out to be a pretty good play for the administration and turned into a modern bread and circuses routine they can run while the rest of the country falls apart. I mean, the more Americans were goofing about the prospect of an alien invasion, the less they were thinking about, say, the cost of living, which, despite inflation easing off a bit, is still so brutal that the Wall Street Journal this week offered the helpful budget-saving advice that if things like eggs, which have nearly doubled in price, are too expensive, then maybe you should just skip breakfast. But as this North Carolina food bank and thousands others like it across the U.S. point out, the problem is more than just the cost of a couple of eggs over easy.
As food prices go up, so does the number of people who are hungry. A nonprofit in our state says it's seen a 38% increase in the number of people needing grocery assistance in the past year. Loaves and Fishes in Mecklenburg County say to meet the need, it's spent 74% of its allocated food budget in just 4 months.
And it's not just food that people are having problems with. There are so many other issues. Like, for example, that horrific train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, that has killed fish and livestock and contaminated waterways and seen a town evacuated after a so-called controlled burn. And then its residents told to return like, oh, hey, this massive fire of toxic chemicals, totally fine. Here is Transportation Pete Buttigieg the other day. I mean, look what he had to say when he thought it was more important to talk about the race of construction workers than a major disaster in his portfolio. Seriously.
Work with your contractors, to work with your community colleges on building a workforce that reflects the community. We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good-paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Right.
You can build community wealth that will help close wealth gaps in this country.
And of course, there remains the very big question of what very real intelligence the first spy balloon the U.S. detected could have picked up. And of course, now it also turns out, while everybody was paying attention to this other stuff, that it had been detected at launch and may have scooped up God knows what as a prelude to whatever China's longer-term plans for Taiwan and the Pacific may be. To put it another way, the White House would rather have Americans thinking about alien balloons than, well, the alternative.
This is what we've